5 days after my hip replacement surgery, I was still using a walker when my wife walked into the bedroom and said, "My whole family will be here Saturday. 20 people. Make sure everything's ready like always." I just looked at her and nodded. That night, while searching for my rehab paperwork, I found something buried in an old file cabinet that made me stop breathing. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. The next morning, I quietly made one phone call, and by Saturday, every smile on their faces had completely disappeared. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary after years of saying yes, just yes or no? Your perspective matters to me. A few details are fictionalized to emphasize the lesson, but the message is what I hope stays with you. I had positioned my armchair exactly according to the physical therapy guidelines they had given me at discharge. My walker rested against the wall within easy reach. The incision still pulled when I shifted weight. Marla stood near the kitchen doorway, 57 years old, and still teaching part-time at the local elementary school. Her phone in one hand, and her gaze fixed somewhere past my left shoulder. "This Saturday," she said without making eye contact. "The whole family is still coming. 20 people. You need to make sure you handle the preparations like every year." I opened my mouth, then I closed it. 20 people. Every summer for 24 years. My mother-in-law Beulah and her husband Roy. My wife's brother Sherman, his wife, their 2 children, extended cousins, friends of the family who had somehow become permanent fixtures, all descending on this house for their annual summer gathering, expecting meals, prepared beds, made bathrooms cleaned, groceries purchased, entertainment arranged, all of it handled by me. Marla had never asked if I wanted to host. She had simply announced the dates each year and walked away, leaving me to manage the logistics while she played gracious hostess. I had spent 24 summers transforming this home into a free resort for people who arrived empty-handed, ate until they were full, and left without offering to reimburse a single dollar. 6 days ago, a surgeon had replaced my right hip. The rehabilitation protocol was strict: no heavy lifting, no prolonged standing, no bending beyond 90 degrees. I was supposed to be resting, recovering, relearning how to walk without pain, and my wife had just told me to prepare for 20 guests. I nodded. I did not argue. I did not protest. I did not point out the surgical incision still healing beneath the compression garment wrapped around my thigh. I nodded because I had just made a decision. Marla interpreted my silence as agreement. She always did. She picked up her phone, scrolled through something on the screen, and walked into the kitchen without another word. I heard the refrigerator door open, the clink of a glass, the sound of her footsteps moving toward the bedroom. I sat alone in the living room as the evening light faded through the curtains. For 38 years, I had worked as a maintenance engineer at a mid-sized manufacturing plant outside Nashville. I diagnosed broken machinery. I scrutinized contracts before signing. I read technical specifications with the kind of attention most people reserved for novels. I had built a career on precision, on understanding the fine print, on knowing exactly what I was agreeing to before I put my name on a document. I had never applied those professional skills to my own marriage. That night, some instinct told me to look deeper. At 11 o'clock, long after Marla had gone to bed, I made my way into the kitchen. The walker thumped softly against the tile floor. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting everything in a pale yellow glow. I opened the filing cabinet we kept beside the pantry and pulled out the drawer labeled Insurance and Medical. I was looking for the Rehabilitation Center paperwork, pre-authorization forms, coverage documents, the kind of bureaucratic debris that accumulates after any medical procedure. But beneath the insurance file I found something else, a warranty deed, dated 1987. I pulled it out carefully, unfolding the paper on the kitchen counter. The print was old, but still legible. Legal language, formal phrasing, the kind of document I had reviewed 1,000 times in my professional life, but never thought to examine in my personal one. My parents had executed this deed 37 years ago. They had transferred ownership of this house to me as sole and separate property. Not joint, not marital. Sole. The deed was recorded in 1987, 13 years before I married Marla. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I read it a third time. And only on that third reading did I allow myself to breathe. There was no mortgage. My parents had paid off the house before transferring it. The property taxes had always been paid from a separate account in my name alone. For 37 years, this house had legally belonged to me and no one else. Marla had no claim to it. Not under Tennessee law, not under any law. I stood in the kitchen under that dim overhead light, my hip aching my hands, steady on the paper. And I understood something I should have understood decades ago. I had spent 24 years believing this house belonged to both of us, simply because we lived in it together. I had assumed that marriage meant shared ownership, shared responsibility, shared everything. I had never questioned it. I had never looked. But my parents had been careful. They had given me this property as mine alone. They had structured the deed to protect me, to ensure that no matter what happened, I would always have a place that answered to no one but myself. And for 24 years, I had surrendered that protection without even realizing it. I folded the deed carefully, ran my thumb along the crease, and slipped it into the breast pocket of my shirt. My heartbeat was steady. My thoughts were clear. For the first time in decades, I felt something that resembled control. I had been a maintenance engineer for 38 years. I knew how to identify a structural problem. I knew how to assess damage. I knew how to determine whether a system could be repaired or whether it needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. My marriage was a system, and it had been broken for a very long time. I turned off the kitchen light and made my way slowly back toward the bedroom, the deed resting against my chest, the decision already made. Tomorrow morning I would call Thurston Iverson. Thurston had been my attorney for 15 years. He handled estate planning contract reviews, the occasional legal question that came up in the course of ordinary life. He was methodical, discreet, and expensive. Exactly the kind of person I needed right now. I would ask him to confirm what I already suspected, and then I would decide what to do with that confirmation. The house was silent as I climbed into bed beside my wife. She did not stir. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the folded paper in my pocket. Saturday was 5 days away. 20 people were coming. And for the first time in 24 years, I was not going to simply nod and comply. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark beside Marla, listening to her breathe the deed folded against my chest, and I thought about every summer I had spent managing her family's comfort, without once asking whether I had a choice. By 9 o'clock a Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my car. I had parked in the driveway with the engine off, my phone in my hand, the windows cracked to let in the June air. Marla was inside the house, getting ready for her shift at the elementary school. I had told her I needed to make some calls about the surgery follow-up. She had not asked for details. I scrolled through my contacts and found Thurston Iverson's number. Thurston Iverson was 63 years old and a real estate attorney in Nashville. He had handled my parents' estate planning years ago. He had reviewed contracts for me when I bought my truck, when I refinanced some old credit card debt, when I needed advice on an employment dispute at the plant. He listened with the practiced patience of a man who had reviewed thousands of property disputes and knew the difference between emotion and evidence. He answered on the second ring. "Lowell," he said. "It has been a while. What can I do for you?" "I need you to review a document," I said. "A warranty deed from 1987. I'm going to send you a photo right now." I took a clear picture of the deed and sent it through. Then I waited. Thurston did not make small talk. He did not ask why I was calling or what had prompted the request. He simply said, "Give me a few minutes," and hung up. 12 minutes later, my phone rang. This is sole and separate property under Tennessee Code. Annotated Section 36-3-502. Thurston said without preamble. The deed predates your marriage by 13 years. The property was transferred to you as an individual, not as part of a marital estate. There is no mortgage. The taxes have been paid from a separate account in your name. There is no record of commingling. He paused. Marla holds zero legal rights to this asset. She is a resident, not a co-owner. Your standing is absolute. I sat in the driver's seat, my hand gripping the phone, my heart beating steadily in my chest. Are you certain? I asked. Completely, Thurston said. This is one of the cleanest separate property cases I have seen in years. If this ever went to court, no judge in Tennessee would grant her a claim. The documentation is airtight. I exhaled slowly. What do you want to do? Thurston asked. It was a simple question, but it carried weight. What did I want to do? I wanted to stop hosting 20 people every summer while recovering from surgery. I wanted to stop spending my weekends preparing meals for guests who never offered to help clean up. I wanted to stop pretending that my silence was the same thing as agreement. I wanted my house back. I need to think about next steps, I said. But I wanted to confirm the legal standing first. Understood, Thurston said. Call me when you are ready, and Lowell be strategic. You have leverage now. Use it carefully. I thanked him and ended the call. For a long moment, I sat alone in the car, staring through the windshield at the house my parents had given me 37 years ago. The house I had lived in for most of my life. The house that legally belonged to me and no one else. I looked into the rearview mirror. The man looking back at me seemed different from the one I had faced every morning for 24 years. His jaw was set. His eyes were clear. He looked like someone who had just remembered he had a choice. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. I drove home with a list forming in my mind, and it was not a grocery list. Tuesday afternoon, I sat across from Thurston in his small downtown Nashville office and learned how to turn a renovation contract into a fortress. The list I had been compiling in my mind during the drive home had been simple. 3 items. First, establish legal documentation that the house belonged solely to me. Thurston had already confirmed that. Second, create a legitimate reason why the house could not accommodate guests this coming Saturday. Third, execute that reason in a way that left no room for argument. Thurston's office was functional rather than impressive. 2 filing cabinets, a desk with a computer monitor, a bookshelf lined with Tennessee Code volumes. He sat behind the desk with a yellow legal pad in front of him, his reading glasses perched on his nose. A paper trail, he said, without preamble. Everything in writing. Everything defensible. I am listening, I said. You are going to hire contractors to perform legitimate home renovation work, Thurston said. Floor refinishing, interior painting, projects that require chemical exposure, polyurethane sealant, oil-based paint, volatile organic compounds. The kind of work that triggers mandatory safety protocols. He tapped his pen against the legal pad. But the no occupancy clause is not a preference. It is mandatory under OSHA 29 CFR 1910.1000 when chemical vapor concentrations reach certain levels during interior floor refinishing and painting. Federal regulation. Not negotiable. I leaned forward. So if I schedule this work to begin Saturday morning, the house becomes legally uninhabitable for the duration of the project. Thurston finished. Typically 2 weeks for a full interior job. The contractor will include the no occupancy clause in the contract as a standard safety provision. You will sign as the sole owner. Marla's signature is not legally necessary because she holds no property rights. 38 years diagnosing machinery failures taught me one thing. Documentation beats memory every single time. I want the contract ironclad, I said. Thurston nodded. I will draft the language myself. You will receive 2 copies, one for you, one for the contractor. The foreman will receive the keys Thursday afternoon during the final contract signing. Everything will be documented. Everything will be legal. He looked at me over his glasses. Are you prepared for the reaction when you inform your wife? I am prepared, I said. I was not certain that was true. But I said it anyway. By Wednesday morning, I had 3 contractor companies lined up. I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot 2 miles from home. I had driven there specifically to make these calls away from the house, away from any possibility that Marla might overhear. My phone was charged. My notes were organized. My voice was steady. I sat in that parking lot holding my engineering logbook from 38 years at the plant. The first call went to a flooring and drywall company based in Nashville. A woman answered on the second ring. I need to schedule a complete interior floor, refinishing and painting job, I said. Starting this Saturday, 2-week duration, full house approximately 2,000 square feet. We can do that, the woman said. Let me transfer you to our project manager. The project manager was a man named Dale. He asked about square footage, current floor condition, paint requirements. I answered each question precisely. Then I asked the question that mattered. I need confirmation that the contract will include a strict no occupancy clause due to chemical exposure, I said. OSHA guidelines for polyurethane sealant and oil-based interior paint. Absolutely, Dale said. Standard protocol. When we are doing full interior work with those materials, the property has to be vacant. We include that in every contract. Liability issue. I want that language in writing, I said. You will get it, Dale said. I scheduled the work for Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. The second call went to an HVAC company. This one was easier because it was not fabricated. The air conditioning unit had been rattling for 3 weeks. I had mentioned it to Marla twice. She had told me to handle it, so I was handling it. The HVAC technician confirmed he could come out Thursday morning for an inspection. I asked him to document the noise, the age of the unit, and any recommended repairs. He said he would provide a full written report. Perfect, I said. The third call went to a painting company. I explained that I had already scheduled floor refinishing starting Saturday and wanted to confirm their standard safety policy when interior painting overlapped with polyurethane application. Yeah, we do not allow occupancy during that kind of work, the man on the phone said. Fumes are too strong. We put it right in the contract. Customer has to vacate for the duration. Can you reread the safety clause for me? I asked. I want to confirm the no occupancy requirement when interior painting overlaps with floor refinishing. He read the clause verbatim. I wrote it down word for word. Thank you, I said. I will have the signed contract back to you by Thursday. I recorded each call. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. I was a participant in every conversation. The recordings were legal. I saved them in a folder labeled Home Maintenance and backed them up to 2 separate cloud accounts. Thurston had been right. Every receipt, every recording, every signed contract was another layer of protection I could not have built on memory alone. By Wednesday afternoon, I had a renovation contract signed in my name as sole owner, a start date of Saturday at 8 in the morning, and 3 separate written confirmations that the house would be legally uninhabitable for 2 weeks due to federal safety regulations regarding chemical exposure. I had not told Marla yet. That conversation would happen Thursday evening after the HVAC inspection. After the final contractor signature, after every piece of documentation was locked in place and beyond her ability to interfere, I sat in the pharmacy parking lot with my phone in my hand and my logbook closed on the passenger seat. My hip ached from sitting too long in the car. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I had spent 24 years accommodating every demand without question. I had said yes when I wanted to say no. I had hosted when I wanted to rest. I had smiled when I wanted to scream. Not anymore! I made a fourth call. This one was not to hire anyone. This one was not part of the plan. This one was just to hear my daughter's voice. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, Grazia answered exactly on schedule, just like she did every single week. Her first question was the same as always. Dad, are you in pain? Grazia Blanchard was 29 years old and working as a registered nurse in Charlotte. She called her father every single week with the same opening question. Not how was the weather. Not how was work. Not what was new. She asked if I was in pain. I sat in the pharmacy parking lot with the late afternoon sun casting deep gold light through the windshield. My phone was pressed to my ear. My throat was tight. A little, I said. Hip surgery recovery, you know how it is. I do know, she said. Are you keeping up with the physical therapy exercises? Every day. There was a pause. Not an awkward silence. Just the kind of quiet that happens between two people who know each other well enough not to fill every second with noise. Dad, she said carefully, something is different in your voice. What is going on? I had not planned to tell her everything. But sitting in that parking lot holding the phone, hearing the concern in her voice, I found myself laying it all out. The surgery. Marla's announcement about the 20 guests arriving Saturday. The warranty deed I had discovered proving the house belonged solely to me. The conversation with Thurston. The renovation contracts I had signed. The no occupancy clause that would make the house legally uninhabitable starting Saturday morning. I told her all of it. Grazia stayed silent for 10 full seconds after I finished. I could hear the background noise of the hospital break room where she made these calls, distant voices, the hum of a vending machine, footsteps in the hallway. You are doing the right thing, Dad, she said finally. Her voice was steady, clear. You do not have to do it alone. Do you need me to fly home? She was the only person who asked if I was in pain. The only one. In 24 years. Not yet, I said. But I am holding on to that offer. I mean it, Grazia said. I can be there in 4 hours if you need me. Just say the word. I know you mean it, I said. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked practical questions. Where would I stay during the renovation? Had I prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Marla? Did I have documentation of everything? She did not ask why I was doing this. She did not suggest I try talking to Marla first. She did not tell me I was overreacting. She simply listened, validated, and offered help. When we finally hung up, I sat alone in the car for a long time, staring through the windshield at the pharmacy entrance, feeling something I had not felt in years. Supported. I drove back home. Marla was cooking dinner. She asked where I had been. I told her the pharmacy. It was the only time in 24 years I had not been fully transparent. But transparency required a partner willing to listen. And Marla had stopped listening a long time ago. Thursday evening arrived like any other evening, 2 days before Saturday. 2 days before the contractors would arrive at 8 in the morning and render the house uninhabitable. 2 days before Marla's family would show up expecting beds made and meals prepared and a free 2-week vacation. Marla and I sat in the living room watching television. An old crime drama she liked. I was not paying attention to the plot. I was studying her face in the flickering blue light from the screen. 57 years old. Still attractive. Still capable of laughing at the jokes in the show. Still the woman I had married in 2000 with the belief that marriage meant partnership. She turned to me during a commercial break. "What about the preparations for Saturday?" she asked. "The guest bedrooms, the living space, the food." "I am handling it," I said. It was not a lie. I was handling it, just not in the way she expected. She nodded and turned back to the television. I sat there watching her watch the screen, and I wondered how much of what we had built together had been genuine love, and how much had simply been routine. How much had been partnership, and how much had been me never having another option because I had convinced myself that leaving was not something good men did. Good men stayed. Good men provided. Good men sacrificed. But at what point did sacrifice become self-erasure? That night after Marla went to bed, I packed my bags, slowly, item by item, because my healing hip would not allow me to rush. 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, medications, the folder containing the warranty deed, the renovation contracts, and Thurston's legal summary, my phone charger, my wallet, the small framed photograph of Grazia from her nursing school graduation. I moved through the house like a man cataloging memories. The kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for people who never said thank you. The living room I had cleaned hundreds of times after gatherings I had never agreed to host. The bedroom where I had slept beside a woman who had stopped asking about my day years ago. I zipped the bag closed and set it by the bedroom door. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a note. Brief, matter of fact, completely devoid of explanations. Marla staying at rehab center for extended recovery, as recommended by surgeon. House undergoing scheduled renovation work starting Saturday. No occupancy permitted due to OSHA chemical exposure regulations. Contractors have keys. I will be in touch. Lowell. I read it twice. It was the truth. All of it. Just arranged in a way that avoided confrontation before the execution. Friday morning, I told Marla I had a follow-up appointment at the rehabilitation center and would be staying overnight for observation. She accepted this without question. She had plans to visit her sister Friday evening anyway. She would not be home when I left. Friday afternoon, I loaded my bag into the car. I walked through the house one final time, checking windows, adjusting the thermostat, turning off lights I would not be turning back on for 2 weeks. The note I left on the refrigerator contained 4 sentences and 0 apologies. I had taped it exactly where Marla would see it when she came home Friday evening from her sister's house. White paper, black ink, centered on the refrigerator door at eye level. To gone to rehabilitation center per surgeon's orders. House closed for scheduled renovation beginning Saturday. Contractors have keys handed over Thursday per contract. Do not interfere liability issue with insurance. 4 sentences. No explanations, no justifications. Just facts arranged in the order that would cause the least resistance before Saturday morning. I had stood in the kitchen for a long moment, after taping the note looking around at the space I had occupied for so many years. The countertops I had wiped down thousands of times. The stove where I had prepared countless meals for people who never offered to help clean up. The refrigerator that had been stocked every summer with food I had purchased, cooked and served without ever being asked if I was tired. I had cooked in that kitchen for nearly a quarter century. Tonight, someone else would figure out dinner. I walked through the living room one final time. The furniture I had assembled, the floors I had vacuumed, the windows I had cleaned. Every surface held a memory of labor performed without acknowledgement. I flipped off the light. The walker clicked against the tile as I wheeled my suitcase to the car. My hip ached from the effort, but the pain felt different now. Not the crushing weight of obligation, just the normal discomfort of a body healing from surgery. I locked the door behind me and drove to the rehabilitation center. The facility was quiet when I checked in Friday evening. A private room with safety grab bars in the bathroom, a hospital bed with adjustable rails, a window overlooking a small garden. The nurse who processed my intake paperwork asked if I needed anything for pain. I told her I was managing. She nodded and left me alone. I unpacked slowly. Clothes in the small closet, toiletries in the bathroom, the folder containing all my legal documents in the nightstand drawer. I set my phone on the bedside table, turned off the ringer, and climbed into bed. I slept for 6 solid hours. My longest stretch of uninterrupted sleep since the surgery. The next morning, my phone began to vibrate. I let it ring. Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning. The renovation crew would have arrived at the house 2 hours ago. The family would have started showing up around 9:30, expecting to walk into an open door and a fully prepared home. Instead, they would have found contractor's equipment and a locked gate. My phone buzzed again, then again, then again. I sat in the rehab center bed, propped up against 2 pillows, watching the screen light up with incoming calls. All from Marla. I let the first 4 go to voicemail. On the 5th call, I answered. "What on earth did you do?" Marla's voice was sharp, angry, barely controlled. "The entire family is standing in the driveway. The workers will not let anyone pass the gate." "What is going on?" I kept my voice flat. The same tone I had used for 38 years when explaining technical problems to plant managers who did not understand engineering. "I am checking into an inpatient rehabilitation facility under my surgeon's strict directives," I said. "The house is undergoing essential structural renovations. I already informed you that I am physically incapable of hosting anyone right now." "You did not say you were closing the entire house," Marla said. "You did not say you were hiring contractors to start work this weekend. We have 20 people here. What are we supposed to do?" "I suggest finding alternative accommodations," I said. "There are several hotels in Nashville. I can recommend a few if you need assistance." "Why, this is ridiculous," Marla said. Her voice rose. "You are being completely unreasonable. This is our home. You cannot just—" "Oh, it is my home," I said quietly. "Legally. The warranty deed is clear on that point. And I am recovering from total hip arthroplasty, Marla. The medical team ordered 4 weeks of no prolonged standing, no stair climbing, and no heavy lifting. I gave you fair warning." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Fair warning," Marla repeated. "You call this fair warning a note on the refrigerator the night before. I told you Monday evening that I could not handle the preparations," I said. "You chose not to listen. That is not my fault." "I chose not to." Marla stopped. I could hear voices in the background. Her mother, probably. Or her brother. The sound of car doors closing. The distant hum of construction equipment. "You are doing this on purpose," Marla said finally. Her voice was quieter now, colder. "You are punishing me." "I am recovering from surgery," I said. "That is all." "Where are you really?" she asked. "Rehabilitation center," I said. "Inpatient care. The address is in the paperwork on my desk if you need it, but I am not accepting visitors." "Shall not accepting—" Marla made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I could not tell which. "You have lost your mind." "I have found clarity," I said. "There is a difference." I hung up. The phone felt heavier than it should have as I set it down on the bedside table. My heart was beating steadily. My hands were not shaking. I felt no guilt, no second-guessing, just a profound sense of relief. For 24 years, I had accommodated every demand. I had said yes when I meant no. I had hosted when I wanted to rest. I had cooked and cleaned and managed and provided without ever asking if anyone else might contribute. Not anymore. I looked around the rehab center room. Plain white walls, institutional furniture, a window overlooking a quiet garden where no one was demanding anything from me. It was the most peaceful space I had occupied in years. 3 minutes later, another name flashed across the screen. Beulah Whitfield. I picked up the novel I had bought 4 months ago, but never had the luxury to read. Science fiction. Something about colonizing Mars. I had read the first chapter twice before, but never made it to chapter 2 because there had always been something else that needed doing. I opened to chapter 2 and started reading. The phone continued to vibrate on the table beside me. Beulah Whitfield's voice came through the phone with the tone of a woman who had never been told no. I let the phone vibrate twice more before I answered. Beulah Whitfield was 79 years old and widowed for 3 years. She lived in Knoxville and descended on our home every summer with the imperious authority of a matriarch who expected her word to be law. "Ma, what is the meaning of this?" she said without preamble. No hello, no greeting, just an immediate demand for explanation. We drove 3 hours from Knoxville. The grandchildren are exhausted. Open the house immediately. I kept my voice calm, professional, the same tone I had used for 38 years when explaining machinery malfunctions to people who did not understand technical specifications. "The house is a closed construction zone, Mrs. Whitfield," I said. "Per the binding legal contract and OSHA safety standards regarding chemical vapor exposure, 0 occupants are permitted on-site during simultaneous floor refinishing and interior painting. That includes the property owner." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What are you talking about?" Beulah said. Her voice had shifted from imperious to confused. "You cannot just lock us out of the house. We have been coming here every summer for 24 years. You have been invited here every summer for 24 years, I said quietly. "Those are different things." Another pause, longer this time. "No, this is absurd," Beulah said. "I do not care about your construction project. We need access to the house right now. The children are tired. We have luggage. We drove 3 hours. The foreman's direct number is available if you require official confirmation," I said. "But the answer will be the same. Chemical fume concentrations from polyurethane sealant and oil-based interior paint create a mandatory no-occupancy zone. Federal regulation. Not negotiable." For 24 years, she had treated my home like a family resort. That ended today. "Are you joking with me?" Beulah asked. Her voice had gone cold now. Sharp. The tone she used when someone questioned her authority. I am not," I said. "This is unacceptable," she said. "I'm going to speak with Marla. She will sort this out." You are welcome to try," I said. The line went dead. I set the phone face down on the bedside table and picked up my novel. The protagonist had just landed on Mars and was setting up the first habitat module. I had made it halfway through chapter 2 when the phone vibrated again. I finished the paragraph before I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I let it ring through to voicemail. 2 minutes later, another call. Same unknown number. I declined it. Then a text message from Marla. "Answer your phone." I turned the phone face down again and kept reading. 40 minutes later, Sherman called. He sounded like a salesman who thought he knew exactly how to bend the rules. Sherman Whitfield was 54 years old and had worked as a life insurance salesman for 2 decades. He called with the smooth, negotiating tone he used with hesitant clients. Friendly but firm, reasonable but persistent. "See, Lowell," he said. "Let me talk through this situation with you. I think there has been a misunderstanding." "There has not been a misunderstanding," I said. Look," Sherman continued as though I had not spoken. "I handle contracts every day. I know how these things work. The homeowner can easily sign a liability waiver allowing family members on the premises at their own risk. It is a standard procedure. I have seen it done dozens of times. Did you review my specific contract? I asked. Sherman hesitated. Well, no, he said. But I know how standard agreements work. You just need to call the contractor and explain the situation. They will understand. They will not, I said. Because my contract's no occupancy mandate is hard linked to the contractor's primary commercial liability policy. It is not a homeowner's discretionary preference. There was a pause. What does that mean? Sherman asked. His smooth tone had faltered slightly. Cognitional. It means when industrial floor refinishing and interior painting run concurrently, chemical fume concentrations trigger OSHA 29 CFR 1910.1000 protocols, I said. The contractor's commercial liability coverage is completely voided if an uncertified civilian steps inside during active work. The insurance company will refuse to cover any injury, property damage, or health claim that occurs on site. I paused to let that sink in. The homeowner cannot override the commercial insurer. I continued. That authority does not exist. The contractor signed a binding agreement with their insurance provider. I signed a binding agreement with the contractor. Both agreements contain the same no occupancy clause. There is no waiver option. Another pause. This one felt heavier. I am sure there is some way around this, Sherman said, but his voice had lost its confidence. If we just explain to the contractor that you sell life insurance? Sherman, I said. This is commercial property and casualty. They are entirely different animals. Life insurance pays out on death. Property and casualty insurance covers liability for injuries and damages that occur on commercial work sites. The risk assessment models are not comparable. The regulatory frameworks are not comparable. And the no occupancy protocols are non-negotiable. Dead silence. I could hear background noise on Sherman's end of the call. Voices, car doors, someone asking where they were supposed to go. So what are we supposed to do? Sherman asked finally. The smooth salesman tone was completely gone now. He just sounded tired. Find a hotel, I said. There are several options in Nashville. I would recommend booking soon. Summer is peak season. A hotel, Sherman repeated flatly. For 20 people. For 2 weeks. That would be my suggestion, I said. Do you have any idea how much that will cost? Sherman asked. I do not, I said. But I imagine it will be significantly less than the legal liability you would incur by attempting to override a federal safety regulation. Another long silence. Then Sherman said something I could not quite make out. It sounded like he was talking to someone else. A woman's voice responded. Then another voice. The sound of an argument starting. I need to go, Sherman said abruptly. The line went dead. I set the phone down on the bedside table. For the first time in 24 years, I had heard Sherman Whitfield completely speechless. The afternoon sun filtered through the rehab center window, casting warm light across the plain white walls. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse was talking to another patient about medication schedules. A cart rattled past my door. I turned the page of my novel and kept reading. By Saturday afternoon, Marla stood at the Marriott front desk, trying to secure rooms for 20 people without a reservation during peak Nashville summer. I learned about the chaos because Grazia called me that night from Charlotte. Dad, she said. Her voice carried that particular tone nurses use when delivering information that is factually accurate but emotionally complicated. I just got off the phone with Mom. She is at a hotel off Interstate 40 with the entire family. 8 rooms, no reservation, peak season rates. How much? I asked. $7,800, Grazia said. For 2 weeks. She negotiated a group discount. 8 rooms at $65 per night for 15 nights. That is not including food parking or incidentals. I sat in the rehab center bed, with my phone pressed to my ear, doing the mental arithmetic I had done countless times before. $7,800. The amount I had spent hosting summer gatherings over the years, groceries, utilities, wear and tear on appliances, replacement furniture after things got broken, had probably exceeded that number multiple times over. But it had been spread out across 2 decades. Invisible. Easy to ignore. This was concentrated, immediate, undeniable. What else? I asked. Grazia exhaled slowly. Grandma Beulah is complaining that there is no luxury suite available, she said. Mom is trying to manage crying children who are cranky from the 3-hour drive. Uncle Sherman took his kids to the pool and left Mom to handle check-in. Grandpa Roy is just standing there with his arms crossed, grumbling about how this never would have happened if someone had planned properly. Roy Whitfield was 81 years old and retired from a supervisory position at the same plant where I had once worked. He stood off to the side with his arms crossed while his daughter handled the hotel chaos, offering criticism but no assistance. I could picture it perfectly. The crowded hotel lobby, the harried front desk clerk, Marla juggling room keys and luggage carts, while her family scattered in different directions, each person assuming someone else would handle the logistics. The way I had handled the logistics for 24 years. So how is Mom doing? I asked. Grazia was quiet for a moment. She sounds stressed, she said finally. Really stressed. She asked me if I could call you and find out what kind of cooking oil you usually buy for the kids who have allergies, and whether anyone in the family needs a high chair, and what size pajamas Sherman's youngest wears, because she forgot to pack enough, and the hotel does not have a laundry service that can turn things around overnight. I did not say anything. Dad, Grazia said gently. She has no idea how much you did. She is just now realizing. That was the point, I said. After we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet room and thought about all the summers I had spent tracking details no one else bothered to remember. Dietary restrictions, allergies, clothing sizes, sleep schedules, who needed a nightlight, who could not tolerate certain fabrics, who had to eat at specific times or they got migraines. I had maintained that information in my head for 2 decades because no one else thought it was worth tracking. Now Marla was trying to manage it alone for the first time, and she was drowning. I felt something that might have been satisfaction, or vindication, or just the simple recognition that my labor had been real even when it was invisible. Sunday evening, my phone lit up with a text message. I had spent the day in physical therapy. The rehab center had a demanding schedule, exercises every 2 hours, progress assessments, range of motion tests that left my hip aching. I was exhausted in a way that felt productive rather than crushing. My body was healing. I was making measurable progress. The text was from Marla. Helen wants to know what kind of cooking oil the hotel kitchen uses. Do you know? I stared at the screen for a moment. Helen was one of the extended family members, someone who showed up every summer, ate the meals I prepared, and left without offering to help clean up. I had no idea why she cared about the hotel kitchen's cooking oil. I left the message on read. 20 minutes later, another text. The kids cannot sleep because of the hallway noise. Do you have any suggestions? I set the phone face down on the bedside table. I had spent 24 summers solving problems that were not mine to solve, finding solutions to complaints I had not caused, managing logistics for events I had not agreed to host. Not anymore. Around midnight, a final text arrived. I had been asleep. The phone vibrated on the table, pulling me out of a dreamless rest. I picked it up and squinted at the screen in the dark. Are you doing okay? 3 words. Simple, direct. I stared at them for a full minute. In 24 years of marriage, Marla had never asked me that question. She had asked if I could pick up groceries, if I could fix the leaking faucet, if I could host her family for another summer, If I could handle the preparations, manage the cooking, clean up afterward. She had never asked if I was okay. Not after long days at the plant. Not after my parents died. Not after I came home exhausted from hosting 20 people for 2 weeks straight, my feet aching and my back sore from standing in the kitchen for hours. Not once. And now, sitting in a hotel room, she had paid nearly $8,000 to secure managing logistics she had never had to manage. Before dealing with complaints she had never had to field, she was asking if I was okay. I did not know if it was genuine concern or desperate need for my expertise. I did not know if she was finally seeing me as a person or just realizing how much unpaid labor I had provided. I did not know if this was a turning point or just a temporary moment of clarity that would fade as soon as the crisis passed. I locked the phone without responding and set it face down on the bedside table. The room was dark and quiet. Outside my window, the rehab center garden was peaceful under the glow of landscape lighting. No demands. No expectations. No one needing anything from me. I closed my eyes and went back to sleep. Monday morning, I was eating breakfast in the rehab center's sunny dining area when Thurston Iverson called with something he said I needed to know. I had slept better than I had in weeks. No midnight texts. No demands. Just the quiet hum of the rehabilitation center and the knowledge that my body was healing on its own schedule, not someone else's. Breakfast was scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee that was better than I expected. I was halfway through the meal when my phone rang. "Thurston," I said. "Good morning." "There is something I need to tell you," Thurston said, without preamble. His voice carried a weight I recognized from our years of working together. This was not a casual check-in. This was information he had been debating whether to share. "I'm listening," I said. 2 years ago. Thurston said, "Marla called my office. She was asking about asset transmutation." I set down my coffee cup. "What specifically?" I asked. "She wanted to know if a husband's separate property automatically converts to marital property after a certain period of cohabitation," Thurston said. "She asked what the requirements were under Tennessee law, whether there were circumstances that would allow a spouse to claim an ownership interest in property that was titled solely to the other spouse." I lowered my fork. The food suddenly tasted like nothing. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I refused to consult with her," Thurston said. "I cited a conflict of interest under ABA Model Rule 1.7. You are my client. I have been your attorney for 15 years. I cannot ethically provide legal advice to your spouse on a matter that could potentially be adverse to your interests." I sat in the sunny dining room, surrounded by other patients, eating breakfast, having quiet conversations, reading newspapers. Normal people doing normal things. And I was learning that 2 years ago my wife had called my attorney to ask about taking my house. "Did she pursue it further?" I asked. Not with me," Thurston said. "I do not know if she contacted another attorney. I do not know if she took any legal action. But you need to know that she asked the question. She knew about the deed," I said quietly. "Or she wanted to find a way around it," Thurston said. We sat in silence for a moment. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "I have been debating it for days," Thurston admitted. "Ever since you called me last week. I kept thinking about when the right time would be. Then I realized there is no right time for information like this." "I no, I said. "There is not." After we hung up, I sat alone at the breakfast table, staring at my half-eaten meal. 2 years ago. Marla had called an attorney to ask about claiming my property. Not our property. My property. The house my parents had given me as sole and separate ownership 13 years before we got married. She had known it was mine, and she had looked for a way to take it. I pushed the breakfast tray away and walked slowly back to my room. I opened my laptop. The 15-year spreadsheet was waiting. I had started tracking extended family expenses in 2009. That was the year the costs had spiked noticeably. Roy had insisted on a specialized orthopedic mattress for the guest bedroom, $890. Sherman had started bringing extra unannounced guests, friends from work, who needed a place to stay during their Nashville visits. Beulah had demanded an upgrade to the living room air conditioning unit, because the old one was not cooling efficiently enough for her comfort. I had opened a spreadsheet and started logging receipts. Groceries, utilities, replacement furniture after things got broken, new appliances when the old ones wore out from overuse, bedding, towels, kitchen supplies, entertainment expenses, gas for driving people to tourist attractions, parking fees, restaurant bills when I was told the family wanted to eat out, and I was expected to cover it. 15 years of receipts, meticulously organized by date, category, and amount. I scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet and looked at the total. $287,946. I stared at the number. That was 15 years, from 2009 to 2024. It did not include the early years of our marriage from 2000 to 2008, when I had not yet started tracking. The true cost was significantly higher. I opened the calculator application. $287,946 divided by 15 years. $19,196 annually. I ran the calculation again to be certain. $19,196 per year divided by 12 months. $1,599 every single month. I had paid nearly $1,600 a month for 15 years just to be treated as invisible. And 2 years ago, my wife had called an attorney to ask how she could claim ownership of the house I was using to subsidize her family's vacations. I sat in the rehab center room staring at the laptop screen, at the numbers that represented 2 decades of unpaid labor, unacknowledged service, and systematic exploitation. I thought about Marla's text from the night before. "Are you doing okay?" I thought about the hotel bill she was currently paying. $7,800 for 2 weeks, half of what I had spent annually for 15 years. And she was drowning after 3 days. I picked up my phone and called Grazia. She answered on the second ring. "Dad," she said, "is everything all right?" "I need to tell you something," I said. "And then I need to ask you something." I told her about Thurston's call, about Marla's inquiry 2 years ago, about the spreadsheet I had been keeping since 2009, about the total that had just crossed $250,000. Grazia stayed silent as I talked. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, steady and controlled the way nurses breathe when they are processing difficult information. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So to Dad," she said finally. Her voice was calm but carried an edge I had never heard before. "What do you need?" I stared at that number on my laptop screen. $1,599 every single month. For 15 years, I felt something shift inside me that had nothing to do with surgery recovery. "Can you fly down?" I asked. Grazia listened to everything and stayed silent for 10 full seconds before she answered. I sat in the rehab center room with my phone pressed to my ear, the spreadsheet still open on my laptop screen. $287,946. 15 years. $1,599 every single month. I had told her all of it. The ledger, the monthly average, Thurston's revelation about Marla's inquiry 2 years ago. The silence stretched. I could hear the background noise of the hospital break room where Grazia made these calls. The hum of a vending machine. Distant voices. The click of footsteps in a hallway. "Have you booked my ticket yet, Dad?" she asked finally. I blinked. "What?" "My plane ticket," Grazia said. Her voice was steady, clear. "Friday afternoon, right, same day you get discharged. Have you booked it yet, or should I do it myself? Why, you do not have to get in the middle of this, I said. Dad. She cut me off gently but firmly. I am a nurse. I read medical charts to difficult patients every day. Patients who do not want to hear the diagnosis. Patients who argue with the treatment plan. Patients who insist the numbers must be wrong. I read them the chart anyway. Let me read this record for you. She was the only person who asked if I was in pain. Now she was flying home to stand beside me. Friday, I said quietly. I will book the ticket this afternoon. Ma, good, Grazia said. I will fly straight into Nashville International. Same afternoon you are discharged. I will pick you up from the rehab center and we will handle this together. Thank you, I said. No, you do not have to thank me, Grazia said. You are my father. This is what family does. After we hung up, I sat alone in the room, staring at the spreadsheet. I had spent 24 years providing for a family that treated me like hired help. Now my daughter was flying across the country to stand beside me because she understood something Marla had never grasped. Family was not about obligation. It was about reciprocity. I booked the ticket. Direct flight, Friday afternoon, arriving at 3:15. Then I closed the laptop and went to physical therapy. On Tuesday morning, the phone call I received was not from Grazia. I was in the middle of a stretching exercise when my phone rang. The physical therapist paused and gestured for me to take it. I glanced at the screen. Marla. I almost declined the call. But something in the timing felt wrong. It was 11 in the morning. She should have been managing breakfast cleanup, fielding complaints, coordinating whatever activity the family had planned for the day. Hello, I said. She collapsed. Marla's voice was breathless, panicked. Mom collapsed in the hotel lobby. I called 911. We are on the way to the hospital right now. I sat down slowly in the therapy chair. What happened? I asked. I do not know. Marla sounded like she was crying, or trying not to cry. She was sitting in the lobby. She stood up to go back to her room, and she went down. She hit the floor. I thought she was dead. Is she breathing? I asked. Yes, Marla said. The paramedics said she is stable. They think it was her blood pressure. But I do not know what to do. Sherman took the kids to the pool. Roy is napping. I am alone. I closed my eyes. Orthostatic hypotension. Beulah had been dealing with it for years. A textbook episode. Blood pressure plummeted when she stood up too quickly from a seated position, especially after sitting for an extended period. I had managed it quietly every summer without anyone asking how I knew. Tell the ER doctors she has orthostatic hypotension, I said. She takes medication for it, blood pressure regulation. The prescription should be in her pill organizer, white and blue container. She carries it in her purse. There was a pause on the other end of the line. How do you know that? Marla asked. Because this has happened before, I said. Multiple times. At our house. I handled it. Another pause. Longer this time. She cannot stand up rapidly, I continued. Especially not from low seating. The blood pressure drops too fast. She needs to sit on the edge of the seat for 30 seconds before standing fully. I used to check her medication every morning to make sure she had taken it on schedule. I did not know any of this, Marla said quietly. I know, I said. The line went silent except for background noise. The sound of an ambulance siren, voices giving instructions, the metallic click of a gurney being unloaded. I have to go, Marla said. We are at the hospital. But tell them about the medication, I said. And stay calm. She will be fine. This is manageable. Okay, Marla said. She hung up. I sat in the physical therapy room, holding my phone, staring at the blank screen. For 24 years, I had managed Beulah's medical episodes without fanfare. I had waited in emergency rooms while Marla stayed home with the kids. I had coordinated with doctors, tracked medications, ensured Beulah understood the protocol for avoiding future incidents. I had done it quietly, efficiently, without expecting recognition. Marla had never known because I had never told her. I had simply handled it, the same way I had handled everything else. And now, sitting alone in a hotel lobby watching her mother loaded into an ambulance, Marla was experiencing for the first time what I had managed alone for 2 decades. The physical therapist cleared her throat gently. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Family emergency," I said. "My mother-in-law collapsed. Orthostatic hypotension. She will be fine." The therapist nodded sympathetically. "Do you need to cut the session short?" she asked. "No," I said. "There is nothing I can do from here that I have not already done." We finished the exercises. I returned to my room. I ate lunch alone in the dining area. I read another chapter of my novel, and I waited. 3 hours later, Marla called again. I answered on the second ring. Her voice carried zero accusation, zero demand. Just a tone I had never heard in 24 years of marriage. She sounded genuinely frightened and completely alone. I listened to my wife describe her mother's collapse, and for the first time in our marriage, I heard no accusation in her voice. The phone call came 3 hours after the initial emergency. I was resting in the rehab center room, lying on top of the bed with my hip elevated as instructed. The physical therapy session had been demanding. I was tired in the way that comes from productive work, rather than crushing obligation. Marla's voice was different, quieter, stripped of the sharpness I had grown accustomed to over 2 decades. "She is stable," Marla said. "They are keeping her overnight for observation, but the doctor said she should be fine." "Good," I said. There was a pause. "I managed the 911 call alone," Marla said. Sherman was at the pool with the kids. Roy was napping. It was just me. I rode in the ambulance watching the paramedics work on her. I did not know what to tell them. I did not know her medical history. I waited. "You asked about her medication," Marla continued. "The blood pressure medication. The doctors asked the same thing. They found her pill organizer in her purse. White and blue container. Just like you said." "Did she take it this morning?" I asked. "No," Marla said quietly. "She forgot. The hotel routine threw her off." I nodded even though she could not see me. "She has a documented history of orthostatic hypotension," I said. "Blood pressure regulation issues. She cannot stand up abruptly after sitting for a long time. The medication helps, but only if she takes it consistently. 24 years. I had managed her mother's medical crises for 24 years. "How long have you known that?" Marla asked. The question was not accusatory, just genuinely confused. "Since the first summer after we got married," I said. "She had an episode at our house. I took her to the emergency room. The doctor explained the condition, gave me a list of protocols. I have been checking her medication logs every summer since then. Every single morning at 6 o'clock. Marla fell completely silent. "You knew that," she said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said. "I did not," Marla said. "I had no idea she had a medical condition. I had no idea you were managing it." I know," I said softly. "I know a great deal about your family, Marla. Because I was the one keeping them safe." The line went quiet, except for the background noise of the hospital. Distant announcements over the intercom, the beep of medical equipment, footsteps in hallways. "I have to go," Marla said. "They are moving her to a room." "Take care of her," I said, "and take care of yourself." "Okay," Marla said. She hung up. I set the phone down on the bedside table and stared at the ceiling. All those years I had been the invisible infrastructure that kept her family functioning. Medical management, logistics coordination, crisis response. All of it performed quietly, efficiently, without recognition. And Marla had never known because she had never asked. Before I tell you what Sherman said next, are you still with me? Comment A if you think he was genuinely reflecting, or B if you think he was just feeling the financial pressure. Add one short reason. Please note some details ahead are adapted for storytelling to convey the emotional truth. Wednesday morning, I was practicing my stride down the rehab center corridor when Sherman called. It was the family's 5th day at the hotel. I was moving slowly but steadily with the walker building strength in my healing hip. The physical therapist had instructed me to walk for 15 minutes 3 times a day. Deliberate steps, controlled motion, no rushing. My phone rang halfway down the corridor. I stopped and pulled it from my pocket. Sherman, I answered. I just looked at the hotel invoice, Sherman said. All the swagger was completely gone from his voice. He just sounded tired. 4 nights alone have cost us $2,080. The full 2 weeks is going to hit nearly $8,000. I stopped walking mid-stride. What do you want me to say, Sherman? I asked. There was a long pause. I just want to understand why, Sherman said. His voice was quiet, genuinely questioning. Why did you do this? Why now? I leaned heavily on the walker. My hip was starting to ache from standing in one position too long. You sold insurance for 20 years, Sherman, I said. You understand risk management, risk assessment, calculating exposure. Yeah, Sherman said slowly. Every single year you ran 20 people through my home without once calculating the structural toll or the financial cost, I said. That was a risk I carried entirely alone, on my own back, for 2 decades. I paused. This year my body physically gave out, I continued. Not because I refused to host, but because a surgeon said no. Because continuing would have caused permanent damage to my hip joint. Because there are limits to what the human body can sustain. That question, why, was the first honest thing Sherman Whitfield had asked me in 2 decades. A long silence stretched over the line. I could hear background noise on Sherman's end, children playing, the distant sound of a television, hotel sounds. I never looked at it that way, Sherman said quietly. I know, I said. Another pause. Is there anything we can do to make this right? Sherman asked. The question caught me off guard. Now, I do not know, I said honestly. I am still figuring that out myself. Okay, Sherman said. I understand. He hung up. I set the phone down and resumed my walk down the corridor. One deliberate step at a time, exactly as the physical therapist had ordered. My hip ached. My muscles protested. But I kept moving forward. For the first time in 24 years, someone in that family had actually listened. Wednesday evening, I learned what happened at the restaurant when my wife defended me for the first time in 24 years. Sherman's phone call had been unexpected. His question, why, had been genuine. I had spent the rest of Wednesday afternoon processing that small shift, wondering if it meant anything, or if it was just temporary clarity brought on by financial stress. Then Marla texted me. It was 9:30 in the evening. I was reading in bed, my hip elevated on pillows as instructed. The phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up, expecting another logistics question or a brief medical update about Beulah. Instead, I got a full paragraph recounting what had happened at dinner. The family had gone to a local restaurant. Halfway through the meal, Roy had griped aloud to no one in particular. What is Lowell playing at in that rehab center anyway? Roy had said. Why cannot he just do his exercises at home like a normal person? Marla had responded calmly that the surgeon had stated I needed specialized equipment and professional nursing care. Roy had scoffed. "Now, you have family right here," Roy had said. "Plenty of hands to help him out. No need to waste money on some fancy facility." That was when Marla had stopped eating. She had set down her fork, looked directly at her father, and spoken words that apparently escaped her mouth before she could filter them. "Dad, Marla had said. Our family comes here to get a free vacation. Nobody was ever going to lift a finger to nurse Lowell. The entire table had dropped into dead silence. Beulah had stared at her daughter in shock. Sherman had frozen mid-bite. The children had looked confused. Roy had opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. Marla had looked down at her own hands, apparently stunned by her own outburst. No one had spoken for the rest of the meal. I read the text message twice. Then I scrolled down to the final line. I see it now. 4 words, nothing more. I read those 4 words 3 times. I see it now. I did not respond immediately. I sat in the quiet rehab center room, holding my phone, processing what had just happened. For 24 years, Marla had stood with her family. She had sided with her mother, deferred to her father, accommodated her brother. She had never once questioned their assumptions or challenged their expectations. And tonight, in a crowded restaurant, she had publicly broken ranks. Not because I had asked her to, not because I had demanded it, but because she had finally seen the pattern she had been participating in for 2 decades. I typed a simple response. Thank you for telling me. Then I set the phone down and went to sleep. Thursday morning, I sat at the small desk and began compiling the pieces. The rehab center room was small but functional. I had requested a portable compact printer earlier in the week. The staff had provided one without question. I set it up on the desk beside my laptop and began the work I had been preparing for since I discovered the warranty deed. Thurston called at 9 o'clock to advise on formatting. Every scanned receipt, organized chronologically from 2009 to 2024. Thurston said. Annual breakdown tabs, summarized categories, everything defensible. Make it look like an engineering report, not an emotional screed. I understood, I said. I spent 3 hours organizing the digital files. Groceries, utilities, replacement furniture, appliances, medical supplies, entertainment expenses, gas, parking, restaurant bills, 15 years of receipts, all scanned, all categorized, all totaled. Then I added the photographs. I had not taken them out of premeditated malice. They were engineering habit. For 38 years, I had documented site conditions as part of my job. Equipment installations, machinery layouts, environmental factors. It was standard practice. Protect yourself with visual records. I had applied the same practice at home without thinking about it. Beulah sitting in my kitchen drinking premium espresso from the specialized machine I had bought specifically for her visits. The timestamp read July 2022. Roy fast asleep in the expensive custom recliner I had purchased for his chronic back pain, August 2021. Sherman's kids piled onto the leather sectional sofa I had replaced out of pocket in 2018 after Marla declared the old furniture embarrassing for guests. Each photograph carried a date, a location, a context, not accusation, just records. I formatted everything into a clean document. Black text on white background. Professional fonts. Clear section headers. Then I created the cover page. 24 years of hospitality. Below that, in slightly smaller text, $287,946. The number represented the full span of our marriage, though the itemized accounting only began in 2009. The true cost was higher, but this was what I could prove. I saved the document. Then I began printing. The compact printer worked slowly. Each page took 15 seconds. The full document was 43 pages long. Cover page, executive summary, annual breakdowns, receipt scans, photographs, closing statement. I printed the first copy, checked it for errors, adjusted 2 formatting issues, printed again. Then I printed 21 more copies, one for Marla, one for Beulah, one for Roy, one for Sherman, one for every adult member of the extended family who had participated in these gatherings over the years, and one final copy to keep for myself. By Thursday afternoon, I had 22 identical bound documents stacked neatly on the desk. The printer had run out of paper twice. I had requested refills from the staff. They had provided them without asking what I was printing. Privacy policies. I was grateful for them. I texted Thurston a photo of the finished stack. He responded immediately. Professional, defensible, well done. I set my phone down and looked at the documents. 22 copies. 43 pages each. 946 pages total. Nearly 1,000 pages documenting 2 decades of invisible labor, unacknowledged service, and systematic exploitation. Not revenge, just accounting. I thought about Grazia's flight arriving tomorrow afternoon. I thought about Marla's text from last night. I thought about Sherman's question and Roy's silence and Beulah's hospital stay. I thought about 24 years of saying yes when I meant no, and I felt something that might have been peace. I printed 22 identical copies, one for every adult member of her family, and one final copy to keep for myself. Tomorrow Grazia would arrive, and together we would present the full accounting. Friday morning, Grazia walked into the rehab center room straight from Nashville International Airport, carrying nothing but a small overnight bag. The 22 printed dossiers sat stacked neatly on the desk where I had left them Thursday evening. I had slept well. No anxiety, no second guessing. Just the calm that comes from knowing you have prepared thoroughly. Grazia knocked once and entered. She was wearing her travel clothes jeans, a comfortable sweater, sneakers designed for long airport walks. She looked tired from the flight, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Dad," she said. She crossed the room and embraced me carefully, mindful of my healing hip. When she stepped back, she watched me walk toward the chair using only a standard cane. "You are moving much better than expected," she said. I smiled. 38 years as an engineer, I said. "I know how to follow a technical manual." Grazia sat down in the chair across from me. I handed her one of the bound dossiers from the desk. "Read it," I said. "Then tell me what you think." She opened to the first page and began reading. I watched her work through the document page by page. She did not skim. She did not skip ahead. She read every word with the same systematic attention she probably gave to patient charts at the hospital. Cover page, executive summary, annual breakdowns, receipt scans, photographs, closing statement. 15 minutes passed in complete silence. She read it like a nurse reviewing a medical chart. Clinical, objective, undeniable. When she finished the final sheet, she placed the document down on her lap deliberately and looked up at me. "Will you let me read the executive summary aloud when everyone is gathered?" she asked. I nodded. "If you are comfortable doing that," I said. "I am," Grazia said. She paused. "Did you really check her medication compliance every year?" "Every single morning at 6 o'clock, I said. Grazia nodded slowly. Understanding confirmed. "They had no idea," she said quietly. "It was not a question." No, I said, "No, they did not." She picked up the dossier again and flipped back to the photograph section. Beulah at the espresso machine. Roy in the recliner. Sherman's children on the sofa. These are not accusations," Grazia said. "These are just records." "Exactly," I said. She closed the folder and looked at me. "When do we do this?" she asked. "Tonight," I said. That afternoon I called Marla. She answered on the first ring. "Have the family meet at the house at 7 tonight?" I said. "We need to talk." There was a pause. "Yeah, the contractors are finished?" Marla asked. "They finished yesterday," I said. "The house is ready." Another pause. "All right," Marla said quietly. "I will tell everyone." Grazia and I arrived at the house at 5 o'clock to prepare. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell of fresh paint hung faintly in the air. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the transformation. The hardwood floors gleamed. newly refinished. Every board smooth and level. The polyurethane sealant had cured perfectly, leaving a surface that looked almost liquid in the light. The walls were freshly painted. Not a single blemish. Not a scuff mark or handprint or stain. Just clean, neutral color that made every room feel larger and brighter. The HVAC hummed quietly in the background. The contractors had serviced it as part of the work. No more rattling. Just steady, efficient climate control. I walked through the kitchen. The floor no longer had the loose, creaking plank I had meant to fix for 2 years. The contractors had addressed it during the refinishing work. I walked down the hallway. The walls were stripped clean of the water stain from the winter of 2022, when a pipe had frozen and burst. I had patched it quickly, but never properly repaired the cosmetic damage. Now there was no trace it had ever happened. Grazia walked beside me, taking in the space. "It looks beautiful, Dad," she said. I stopped in the living room and looked around. "My parents handed me this deed in 1987, I said. I do not think I ever actually saw the house for what it was. I was too busy maintaining it for everyone else's comfort." Grazia nodded. We spent the next hour arranging the living room. I set out chairs in a semicircle. Grazia placed the stack of bound dossiers on the coffee table. I called Thurston and asked him to arrive early. He agreed without hesitation. At 6:30, Thurston arrived. He reviewed the setup, nodded his approval, and took a position near the entrance where he could observe without being intrusive. At 6:45, I sat down on the sofa. Grazia sat beside me. My cane rested against the armrest. We waited. Promptly at 7 o'clock, I heard the key turn in the lock. Marla opened the door. She stepped inside first, pausing briefly to take in the transformed space. Then she held the door open as the rest of the family filed in behind her. 20 people. Beulah and Roy. Sherman and his wife. Sherman's children. Extended family members who had been part of these summer gatherings for years. Cousins. In-laws. Friends of the family who had become permanent fixtures. They entered slowly, taking in the gleaming floors and freshly painted walls. The smell of new paint mixed with the faint scent of polyurethane. Their faces carried the defensive posture of people expecting an unearned apology. Beulah seated herself in the central armchair without asking permission. The matriarch claiming her traditional position. Roy stood against the back wall with his arms crossed. Sherman sat beside his wife on one of the arranged chairs, looking down at his hands. The others filled in the remaining spaces. Some sat. Some stood. All of them waiting. Thurston Iverson stood quietly near the entrance, his presence professional and unobtrusive. Grazia sat on the sofa right next to me, her posture calm and composed. I looked around the room at 20 faces, some confused, some defensive, some genuinely curious about why they had been summoned. The house was perfect. The floors gleamed. The walls were immaculate. The air smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. And in the center of that perfection, surrounded by 2 decades of family, I prepared to deliver the accounting they had never asked for, but desperately needed to hear. I stood up slowly from the sofa and placed my cane aside to stand on my own 2 feet. The room was full. 20 people crowded into my living room, filling every chair, leaning against walls, standing in doorways. The smell of fresh paint hung faintly in the air. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the gleaming hardwood floors and spotless walls. Beulah sat in the central armchair, her posture upright and commanding, despite the recent hospital stay. Roy stood against the back wall with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Sherman sat beside his wife, looking down at his hands. The others filled in around them. Extended family. Friends who had become fixtures. All of them carrying the defensive posture of people expecting an unearned apology. Marla stood near the entrance. Her eyes moved from me to Thurston Iverson, who stood quietly against the wall in his professional suit. I watched her expression shift as she locked eyes with me and understood immediately. I spoke calmly. "This is Thurston Iverson," I said. "He is my personal legal counsel, and I requested his presence tonight." Marla's face went pale. She grasped in that instant that this was not a family discussion. This was an official accounting. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I turned my attention to the rest of the family. "Grazia," I said, looking at my daughter. "Would you mind introducing yourself and distributing the documents?" For 24 years, these people had sat in my living room. Tonight, they would listen. Grazia stood and moved to the coffee table where the stack of bound folders waited. She picked them up with the same calm efficiency she probably used handling patient files at the hospital. "Siki, my name is Grazia," she said. Her voice was clear and professional. "I am this man's daughter. I work as a registered nurse in Charlotte. Tonight I will be reading the executive summary on the opening page." She began distributing the folders. One to Beulah, one to Roy, one to Sherman, one to each adult family member present. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of paper and the quiet footsteps as Grazia moved around the room. When everyone held a folder, she returned to the center of the living room and stood facing the family. The room had gone completely cold. Beulah opened her folder first. I watched her eyes scan the cover page. Her expression shifted from confusion to something harder to read. Sherman opened his next, then Roy, then the others. 24 years of hospitality, $287,946. The numbers sat there on the page in clean, professional typeset. Undeniable. Documented. Real. Grazia stood. Her voice was the same tone she used reading vital signs to patients in the ICU. "Page 1, Grazia said. "Financial summary." She paused, letting the room settle into complete silence. "The total out-of-pocket expenditure borne exclusively by Lowell Blanchard for the benefit of extended family members from 2009 to 2024 is exactly $287,946. She let that number hang in the air. No one moved. "This figure," Grazia continued, "represents documented receipts, invoices, and verified transactions over a 15-year period. It does not include the years 2000 through 2008, for which comprehensive records were not maintained. The true lifetime cost is estimated to be significantly higher." I watched Beulah's hands tighten on the armrests of her chair. "Page 2, Grazia said. "Itemized annual breakdown." She turned the page in her own copy with deliberate precision. 2009. Summer catering and groceries, $3,800. Orthopedic mattress purchased for guest bedroom per Roy Whitfield's specific request, $890. Roy's jaw tightened. 2010. Replacement kitchen appliances after extended use, $2,100. Medical supplies and over-the-counter medications for visiting family members, $460. Grazia continued reading. Her voice never wavered, never added emotion, just clinical facts delivered with nursing precision. 2011. Major car rental invoice for Sherman Whitfield when vehicle transmission failed during Memphis visit, $1,800. Sherman's ears turned bright red. He stared fixedly at the floor. 2012. Summer groceries and household supplies, $4,200. Replacement bedding and linens after repeated wash cycles, $620. Beulah opened her mouth as if to interrupt, then closed it again. Year 2013 through 2015. Round-trip travel accommodations provided for Beulah and Roy Whitfield when personal vehicle was unavailable, totaling $7,200. Roy shifted his weight, but said nothing. 2016. Summer hospitality baseline, $12,000. Emergency plumbing repair after guest bathroom incident, $940. 2017. Summer hospitality baseline, $13,500. Replacement outdoor furniture, $1,200. 2018. Replacement living room furniture per request, that existing pieces were inadequate for guests, $2,100. I remembered that conversation. Marla had said the old sofa was embarrassing. I had replaced it without argument. Statiturm. 2019. Summer hospitality baseline, $15,000. HVAC system upgrade to accommodate increased occupancy load, $3,800. Grazia turned another page. 2020 through 2024. Annual average baseline expenditure of $19,000 per year. This includes groceries, utilities, household supplies, maintenance, entertainment, transportation, and miscellaneous expenses directly attributable to hosting extended family gatherings. She looked up from the document. Total across all documented years, $287,946. The silence that followed was absolute. No one coughed. No one shifted in their seat. No one whispered to the person next to them. They just sat there holding their folders, staring at the numbers that quantified 2 decades of exploitation they had never bothered to calculate. Sherman's face had gone from red to pale. His hands gripped the folder so tightly the edges were crumpling. Beulah stared at the page as though the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Roy's arms had uncrossed. He stood against the wall with his hands at his sides, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The room sat in absolute silence. Not a single person moved. Grazia turned the page with deliberate calm and looked up. "Page 14, she said quietly. Photographic documentation. I watched Beulah's face as she looked down at page 14. The photograph showed her seated at my kitchen counter, a magazine open in front of her, a cup of espresso in her hand. The specialized machine gleamed in the background, polished chrome professional-grade equipment. She looked comfortable, relaxed, at home. Her expression shifted as she stared at her own image. The matriarch, who had never once acknowledged that machine's existence, was suddenly confronting the visual proof of her comfortable residency in my space. Grazia's voice cut through the silence. Page 14 contains 3 photographs taken over the past 18 months, Grazia said. Her clinical tone never wavered. Photo 1, dated March 2023, shows Beulah Whitfield seated at the DeLonghi espresso machine, retail value $1,200, purchased and maintained exclusively by Lowell Blanchard. Beulah's hand trembled slightly as she gripped the folder. The photographic record shows the subject using the equipment regularly, Grazia continued. Maintenance logs indicate the machine was cleaned and serviced by Lowell Blanchard on a weekly basis. The subject never performed cleaning or maintenance. I watched the realization settle across Beulah's face. She had drunk that espresso every summer for years. She had never once asked who cleaned the machine, who bought the expensive beans, who descaled the equipment. Grazia turned to the next image. Photo 2, dated June 2023, documents Roy Whitfield asleep in the therapeutic recliner, retail value $980, assembled by Lowell Blanchard over 90 minutes while Roy Whitfield observed. Grazia's finger tapped the timestamp on the photograph. June 17, 2023, 3:47 in the afternoon. Roy had arrived that afternoon, complaining of back pain. By 4:15, he was asleep in the chair I had spent 90 minutes assembling, while Roy critiqued the instruction manual's clarity. Roy's eyes were fixed on that timestamp. His jaw tightened. Photo 3, dated December 2023, shows Sherman Whitfield's children on the sectional sofa, retail value $2,400, purchased after Marla Whitfield declared the previous furniture inadequate for family gatherings. The photograph captured Sherman's kids sprawled across the leather sectional tablets in their hands, shoes kicked off onto my newly cleaned floor. Sherman stared at the image. His children looked happy, comfortable, like they belonged there. But they were guests. They had always been guests. So each photograph, Grazia said, carries a timestamp and location tag. Each represents documented use of equipment and furniture purchased and maintained by Lowell Blanchard for the benefit of visiting family members. Beulah's matriarchal posture crumbled. I watched it happen in real time. The straight spine curved slightly. The commanding presence diminished. She was not looking at herself as a gracious matriarch visiting her daughter's home. She was looking at herself as a comfortable guest who had never once cleaned a single dish. Roy reached forward silently and turned the page in his own folder. It was the first independent action he had taken all evening. I stood up from the sofa. I moved to the center of the living room, positioning myself where everyone could see me clearly. My hip ached slightly from the physical therapy, but I stood without support. No cane, no walker. Just me standing in the middle of my own home. I looked around the room at 20 faces. When I spoke, my voice was steady, calm. It carried no anger, no vindictiveness, only absolute clarity. I am not seeking reimbursement tonight, I said. Nor am I asking for apologies. I let that sink in. Chatti, for 24 years. I continued. Not a single person in this room asked if I was tired. No one inquired whether I wanted to spend my Saturday assembling furniture or my Sunday preparing meals for guests who arrived without requesting permission. The room remained frozen. Beginning January 1st, 2025. I said anyone who wishes to cross this threshold must request permission in writing 72 hours in advance. Anyone who enters must bring their own contributions and handle their own labor. I paused. I will no longer prepare meals, assemble furniture, maintain equipment, or provide unpaid hospitality services to anyone in this family. Beulah opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. I had practiced this speech 3 times in the garage while Grazia reviewed the binder in her car. Each rehearsal I had felt anger rising in my chest. But standing here now looking at their faces, I felt only a profound exhaustion. These were not villains. They were people who had learned they could take without asking, and who had never been taught to stop. I cared for this family deeply, I said. My voice softened slightly. I did so for 2 decades, but I am done being a stranger in my own home. The words hung in the air. Strange, stranger, someone who does not belong in the place they occupy. For 24 years, I had felt like a guest in my own house, a caretaker, a service provider, someone whose job was to maintain the infrastructure while the real family enjoyed the space, no more. This house, I said, belongs to me, legally, financially, emotionally. My parents transferred ownership to me in 1987 as sole and separate property. I have maintained it. I have improved it. I have opened it to you for 2 decades without complaint. I looked directly at Beulah. But it was never yours to command. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even shifted in their seats. They just sat there holding their folders, staring at me, as though seeing me for the first time. Marla sat near the entrance, her hands folded in her lap. I could not read her expression. She was not crying. She was not angry. She was just watching me with an intensity I had not seen in years. I stood in the center of that perfect living room, gleaming floors, freshly painted walls, everything immaculate, and I felt lighter than I had in decades. Those are my terms, I said quietly. Take them or leave them, but they are not negotiable. The room sat in complete silence for 15 seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Marla stood. Her expression was unreadable, not angry, not conciliatory, something else entirely. She looked directly at me. Marla turned her back on Beulah and looked directly at me. The room held its breath. 20 people frozen in place, waiting. Marla's voice when she spoke was steady, clear. "You are completely right," she said. Beulah's mouth opened. To Marla, Beulah started. "Mom." Marla cut her off without turning around. The single word carried absolute authority. Not shouted, just firm, final. The tone of someone who had finally found the line they would not allow anyone to cross. Beulah closed her mouth and sat back in her chair. Marla kept her eyes on me. You are right," she said again. "And I have known it deep down for an incredibly long time. I just never allowed myself to face it." She paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the sound of my own breathing. "I am sorry," Marla said. 2 words, simple, direct. The first and only apology of the entire confrontation. I had prepared myself for defense deflection, perhaps even anger. I had not prepared myself for this. Marla standing in front of her entire family. Her mother, her father, her brother. 20 people who had come here expecting an apology from me. And instead, she was the one apologizing, breaking ranks, publicly. The weight of those 2 words settled over the room like snow. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Sherman stood. He did not say anything. He just picked up his folder, looked at his wife, and walked toward the door. His children followed. One by one, the extended family began leaving. Quiet, subdued. No arguments. No protests. Just the sound of footsteps on the gleaming hardwood floors and the soft click of the front door opening and closing. Beulah remained seated in the central armchair, her hands gripping the armrests. Roy stood against the back wall, his expression unreadable. Thurston Iverson stepped forward from his position near the entrance. He moved quietly to the coffee table and placed a single sheet of paper in front of Marla. She looked down at it. I recognized it immediately. The file memo. The record of her phone consultation 2 years ago. Thurston spoke quietly. "I believe this provides a clean slate for an honest conversation," he said. Then he nodded to me and left. The memo sat on the table between us like a deactivated bomb. Proof of what could have happened, but did not. I had known about her inquiry for less than a week. I could have used it as ammunition. Could have thrown it in her face during the confrontation. Could have humiliated her in front of her family. But I had not. Because this was not about revenge. It was about boundaries. Marla stared at the paper. Her hands trembled slightly. Roy moved for the first time since Marla's apology. He walked past me toward the kitchen, paused beside my chair, looked down at the empty coffee mug someone had left on the side table. He picked it up. Then he walked it to the kitchen sink and rinsed it out himself. No words, just that quiet action. When he returned, he placed a hand briefly on Beulah's shoulder. "Come on," he said gently. "Let them talk." Beulah rose slowly from the armchair. She looked at Marla, then at me. Her expression was complex. Shame, confusion, something that might have been the beginning of understanding. She left without speaking. The house emptied. Grazia had moved to the sofa during the exodus. She was already half asleep, exhausted from the emotional weight of the evening. Within minutes, her breathing had steadied into the rhythm of deep sleep. Marla and I sat across from each other in the kitchen, 2 mugs of coffee cooling between us. The clock on the wall read 10:15. "I was afraid," Marla said finally. Her voice was quiet, raw. 2 years ago, I started thinking about what would happen if our marriage fell apart. What I would have. Where I would go. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. I called Thurston's office to ask about the house. Whether I had any legal claim to it. Whether there was a way to argue that it had become marital property over time. She looked up at me. I was not plotting to steal your house," she said. "I was just terrified, and I did not know how to talk to you about it." I nodded slowly. "Chichen, you were afraid and kept silent," I said. I was exhausted and kept silent. We talked about every logistical detail of our lives except the things that actually mattered. Marla's eyes filled with tears. Then let us talk about them now, she said. We talked until 1 o'clock in the morning, not about logistics, not about schedules or groceries or who needed to pick up what from where, about fear, about resentment, about the ways we had both failed each other by choosing silence over honesty. Marla cried. I did not, but I came close. We talked about her family, about the patterns that had been set 2 decades ago and never questioned, about how she had inherited her mother's expectations without examining whether they were fair. We talked about my silence, about how I had never said no, never set a boundary, never asked for help because I had convinced myself that asking was the same as failing. I thought being a good husband meant doing everything myself, I said. I thought love meant sacrifice. And I thought being a good wife meant keeping my family happy, Marla said, even if it meant ignoring yours. We sat in that kitchen until the coffee was cold and the house was silent. Grazia slept peacefully on the living room sofa. The folders still sat stacked on the coffee table. The evidence of 2 decades. But we were not talking about evidence anymore. We were talking about the future. Can we try again? Marla asked. Can we start over? I thought about that question for a long time. Not start over, I said finally, but start fresh, with honesty this time. Marla reached across the table and took my hand. Honesty, she repeated. I can do that. We went to bed around 1:30. I fell asleep almost immediately. Deep, dreamless sleep. The kind I had not experienced in years. I woke Saturday morning to a smell I had not experienced in 24 years. Someone else was cooking breakfast in my kitchen, the sound of dishes being set quietly on the counter. The soft hum of the coffee maker I had not started myself. The gentle sizzle of eggs in a pan. I lay in bed for a moment just listening. Then I got up, grabbed my cane and walked toward the kitchen to see what came next. Marla was in the kitchen making scrambled eggs and toast. The coffee was already brewed. She smiled when I walked in and gestured to the table. Sit, she said. I have got this. I sat. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I woke on a Tuesday morning and realized the house felt different. Lighter, quieter, mine. The walker had been retired to the garage. I moved easily now with just a standard cane. The physical therapist had cleared me for normal activity. My hip was healing well. Better than expected, she had said. Probably because I was actually resting instead of hosting 20 people. The house had changed in other ways, too. Marla and I had established strict new policies. The open-door policy was permanently dissolved. All future family visits would be agreed upon by both of us in writing at least 72 hours in advance. No exceptions. Marla had insisted on the documentation requirement. That way we never argue over who said what, she had explained. I had looked at her with surprise. Where did you pick up that habit? I asked. She smiled. From you, she said. You have always run your life by documentation. I just never paid attention before. It was a small thing, but it represented something larger. Marla was not just accepting the new boundaries. She was actively participating in building them. We had also established rules for any guests who did visit. They would bring their own supplies, clean up after themselves, manage their own expenses. The days of me subsidizing family vacations were over. For most of my adult life, I had managed this household like a job I could not quit. Now I was managing it like a home I chose to keep. The difference was profound. Marla brought breakfast to the table. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit. Coffee in my favorite mug. Thank you, I said. You are welcome, she said. She sat down across from me, and we ate together. Not in silence, but in the comfortable quiet of 2 people who had finally stopped performing for each other. Grazia had flown back to Charlotte 2 weeks ago. Before she left, she had pulled me aside. "Are you okay?" she had asked. "I am," I had said, and I meant it. "Call me if you need me," she had said. "I will," I had promised, but I had not needed to call. Because for the first time in decades, I was managing my own life instead of everyone else's. After breakfast, I walked out to the backyard garden. It was late July. The Tennessee heat was building, but the morning air was still tolerable. I had planted tomatoes 3 weeks ago, a leisure activity I had not enjoyed in years, because summer had always meant endless demands from visiting family. Now I had time. I knelt carefully beside the tomato plants, mindful of my healing hip, and began checking for pests. The leaves were healthy, green and strong. The first small tomatoes were just beginning to form. I was pruning the lower branches when my phone rang. I pulled it from my pocket and checked the screen. "Beulah Whitfield!" I hesitated for a moment. Then I answered. "Hello," I said. "Lowell." Her voice was noticeably softer than I had ever heard it. The commanding matriarchal tone was entirely gone. "I wanted to ask if it might be convenient for me to visit this coming Saturday just myself. I would really appreciate the chance to sit and talk with you and Marla." I realized halfway through her sentence that Beulah was asking, not announcing. For 24 years, Beulah had informed me when she was coming, told me the dates, expected me to accommodate. Never once had she asked if it was convenient. "I will need to consult with Marla first," I said calmly. "If we are both in agreement, I will call you back to confirm." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "All right," Beulah said. Her voice carried a note I had never heard before. Uncertainty, humility. "Thank you, Lowell." "Thank you." 2 words I had never heard from Beulah Whitfield in 24 years. I stood in the garden with my phone in my hand, staring at the tomato plants, processing what had just happened. "I will call you back this evening," I said. "I appreciate that," Beulah said. We hung up. I walked back into the house. Marla was in the living room reading a book. She looked up when I entered. "Your mother just called," I said. Marla set the book down. "What did she want?" she asked. "She asked if she could visit this Saturday," I said. "Just her. She wants to sit and talk with us." Marla's eyebrows rose. "She asked," Marla said. "Not told." She asked." I confirmed. "She said she would appreciate the chance. And when I told her I needed to consult with you first, she said thank you." Marla stared at me for a long moment. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think it is your decision as much as mine," I said. "This is our home. Not just mine." Marla nodded slowly. "Do you want her to visit?" she asked. I thought about that question carefully. Did I want Beulah in my home? The woman who had treated my space like her personal vacation rental for 2 decades, who had demanded service without gratitude, who had collapsed in a hotel lobby because she forgot to take the medication I had been monitoring for years. But I also thought about the voice on the phone. Soft, humble, asking instead of commanding. People could change, maybe. "I'm willing to find out if she is serious about respecting boundaries," I said. "But only if you are comfortable with it." Marla looked down at her hands. She is my mother," she said quietly. "And she has never asked permission for anything in her entire life. If she is asking now, that means something." She looked up at me. Yes," she said. "Tell her yes. But remind her of the rules. She brings her own food. She cleans up after herself. And she does not stay overnight." "Agreed," I said. I called Beulah back that evening. Confirmed Saturday. Outlined the expectations clearly. She agreed to everything without argument. After I hung up Marla and I sat together on the sofa, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "That is the first time in my life I have heard my mother ask anyone for permission," she said. I wrapped my arm around her. "Things are changing," I said. "I hope so," Marla said quietly. "I really hope so." Saturday came. Beulah arrived exactly on time. She brought flowers and a small bakery box. She stayed for 4 hours. She followed every rule without complaint. And when she left, Marla and I looked at each other and realized that maybe, just maybe, things really were changing. I was repairing the backyard fence when Sherman called. It was late August. The Tennessee heat had finally broken into something tolerable. I was working on a section of fence that had been sagging for months. Not because I had to. Not because guests were coming and I needed the yard to look presentable. But because I wanted to. Because it was my fence. My yard. My choice. My phone rang. I pulled off my work gloves and checked the screen. "Sherman Whitfield," I answered. "Lowell," Sherman said. He sounded different. Quieter. "I have been doing a lot of thinking. All those years you carried the entire load yourself without uttering a word of complaint. What did that actually feel like?" The question caught me off guard. Not because it was hostile, but because it was genuine. "It felt like I was simply doing what was expected of me, Sherman," I said. "The real problem was nobody actually demanded it. I imposed that obligation on myself without pausing to ask if I had a choice." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I think I understand that now," Sherman said finally. His tone carried something I had not heard before. Not defensiveness, not justification, just recognition. Like he was seeing a pattern in his own life that he had never noticed before. I had spent 24 years believing martyrdom was love. It took Grazia 3 hours to prove it was only silence. "Are you all right?" I asked. "I am working on it," Sherman said. I wanted you to know that I heard what you said. At the house, I heard it." "Thank you for telling me," I said. We talked for a few more minutes. Not about the money, not about the confrontation, just about life, about work, about the challenge of recognizing when you are doing something out of obligation versus genuine care. When we hung up, I stood in the backyard, holding my phone, looking at the half-repaired fence. Sherman had called to apologize without apologizing, to acknowledge without admitting. It was not perfect, but it was something. I put my gloves back on and finished the repair. October came. The leaves were beginning to turn. The air had that crisp quality that signaled the approach of winter. Marla and I were preparing dinner together when the doorbell rang, exactly at the agreed-upon hour. I looked at Marla. She looked at me. We had both been wondering if Beulah would actually follow through, if the humility on the phone had been genuine or performative. I walked to the door and opened it. Beulah stood on the porch, carrying a small bakery box in one hand and a modest bouquet of seasonal flowers in the other. She was dressed neatly but not formally. Her expression was calm, almost nervous. "Hello, Lowell," she said. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside and walked straight to the kitchen island. She placed the bakery box and flowers down with deliberate care, as though she was being careful not to presume. Marla came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mom," she said. "Marla," Beulah said, "I did not know your preferred flowers, Lowell, so I made sure to ask Marla beforehand." I looked at the flowers. Chrysanthemums, fall colors, simple and appropriate. "They are lovely," I said. "Thank you." Beulah nodded. She looked around the living room as though seeing it for the first time. "Who did you contact before driving down?" I asked. "Marla," Beulah said immediately. "I made sure to call her phone beforehand, just as you requested, 72 hours in advance." She had followed the rules, exactly as stated. The kitchen island, that once felt like a battlefield staging area, now looked like what it was, just a counter. "Would you like something to drink?" Marla asked. "Water would be fine," Beulah said. We sat in the living room. Marla brought water. We talked. Not about the confrontation, not about the money, just about life, about Beulah's garden, about the book Marla was reading, about my recovery from surgery. Grazia had flown in that morning for a long weekend visit. She joined us after freshening up from her flight. The four of us sat together in a space that used to feel crowded with demands, but now just felt comfortable. When dinner was ready, we moved to the table. Beulah asked if she could help. Marla handed her the salad bowl. Beulah carried it to the table without commentary. We ate together, a simple meal. Chicken, vegetables, bread from the bakery box Beulah had brought. No one waited to be served. No one expected me to jump up and fetch things. We just passed dishes around the table like normal people having a normal dinner. Beulah left at 8 o'clock. "Thank you for having me," she said at the door. "But you are welcome," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one, not just words. But I am not sure I know how to give it yet." "Like you just did," I said. She nodded once. Then she left. Marla closed the door and leaned against it. "That was different," she said. "Yes," I said. "It was." Grazia came down the stairs. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Really good." Winter settled over Tennessee. The temperatures dropped. The trees went bare. The garden went dormant. And I realized something as I sat in my living room on a cold December evening, watching the first snow of the season fall outside the window. This was the first year in 2 decades I was not already dreading the arrival of summer. The cycle had broken. December brought the kind of crisp Tennessee afternoon that makes bare trees look like charcoal sketches against pale winter sky. I stood in the backyard, watching the wind scatter leaves that had stubbornly clung through November, thinking about the warranty deed my parents had executed in March 1987. The deed sat in my study. Now the paper yellowed, but the ink still sharp. For love and affection, and $10 and other good and valuable consideration. That was the language. That was how my father and mother had transferred the house on Ridgecrest Lane to me when I turned 29, 3 years before I married Marla. I had not looked at that document in years, but now I understood something deeper than Tennessee code. Annotated 36-3-502. I understood the intent behind the gift. My father had been a machinist at the Alcoa plant. My mother had worked the register at Kroger for 33 years. They were not people who made grand gestures or explained their reasoning with flowery speeches. When they told me the house was mine, Dad had simply said, "You should own something that is entirely yours." Entirely yours. That was the phrase he used. Not for you and your future wife. Not for your family someday. Entirely yours. They gave me autonomy. They gave me a foundation that could not be taken, could not be negotiated away, could not be leveraged against me. And I had spent 2 decades surrendering that gift, one silent yes at a time. When did service become confused with love? The question sat in my chest, like a stone. Because that was what I had done, was it not? I had told myself that love meant accommodation. That being a good husband meant never saying no to Marla's family. That keeping peace was more important than keeping boundaries. And in doing so, I had dishonored the very thing my parents had tried to give me. The autonomy to say no, the freedom to protect what was mine, the dignity of living in my own house on my own terms. Sherman had asked me back in August what it felt like to carry that load for so long. He had asked because he was starting to feel it himself, the weight of always being the solution to someone else's problem. And I had told him what I wished someone had told me at 35 instead of 60. It feels like slow drowning. That was the truth. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just the gradual accumulation of water in your lungs until one day you realize you have been holding your breath for years. The wind picked up, and I pulled my jacket tighter. Across the fence, I could see the neighbors' Christmas lights already up white icicles along the roofline. Marla had asked if I wanted to decorate this year, and I had said maybe just a wreath on the door. She had nodded, and bought a beautiful one from the farmer's market, magnolia leaves and red berries, and hung it herself without asking me to supervise or approve. That was the difference now. She did not perform for my validation. I did not police her choices. We simply lived alongside each other with the kind of respect that does not require constant proof. The back door opened, and I heard her footsteps on the porch, then the stairs, then the grass. She did not call out or ask what I was thinking. She just walked to where I stood and slid her hand into mine. Her fingers were cold. Mine were too. We stood there watching the wind make patterns in the dry leaves, neither of us needing to fill the silence with explanations. This was what partnership looked like, I realized. Not her mother sleeping in our guest room for 3 months. Not her brother asking for house numbers and tax returns. Not me saying yes to things that hollowed me out because I thought that was what commitment required. Just two people standing in their own backyard holding hands. Because they chose to not, because someone demanded it. I nodded. Beulah had earned that. She had shown up in October with flowers, and the kind of careful deference I had never once seen from her in 24 years. She had not needed to say anything. Her presence at the door on time with her hands full and her voice quiet said it for her. That was enough. Sherman called too. Marla continued. He wanted to know if we would come to Christmas dinner at his place this year. He said his wife is making a standing rib roast and he wants to actually enjoy the holiday, instead of spending it managing everyone else's expectations. I smiled. What did you tell him? I told him we would be delighted. The leaves scattered again, a small cyclone of brown and gold spinning across the lawn before collapsing near the fence. Above us, the sky was starting to turn that particular shade of winter blue that happens just before dusk, deep and clear and cold. My parents had given me this house so I would own something entirely my own. It had taken me 42 years to understand that ownership meant nothing if I did not have the courage to defend it. But I understood now. And standing here with Marla's hand in mine, both of us cold and quiet and content, I knew I had finally honored their gift, not by keeping the house pristine, not by making it a monument to their memory, but by learning to live in it as a free man. Late December, Marla sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked a question I had not heard in 24 years. What do we want to do with our summer? Not when is your mother coming? Not what dates work for Beulah. What do we want? I set down my coffee and looked at her. She had her calendar open, blank pages from May through September. I think, I said, we should take a vacation, just the two of us, somewhere we have never been. Marla smiled. I was hoping you would say that. We spent the next hour planning around what we wanted. A cabin in Gatlinburg for early January. Grazia home for a week in June, just our daughter. Beulah for a single weekend in summer, if we agreed. It sounds like a plan made by normal people, Marla said. I nodded. We spent 24 years being abnormal. About time we tried something else. For the first time, summer was not something to survive. It was something to design. 2 weeks later, we sat on a cabin balcony overlooking the great Smoky Mountains. Pine and wood smoke in the air. Gatlinburg glowing below in the early dusk. We sat in wooden rocking chairs under a wool blanket watching the light fade, neither of us in any hurry to go inside. Marla's phone buzzed. It is Mom, she said. I felt the old tightening in my chest, but I said nothing. I waited. Marla answered and put the call on speaker. Good, Marla. I wanted to inquire, Beulah said. Her voice carried something I had never heard. Hesitation. Deference. Would the house be available this August, just myself? I want to book a nearby hotel room ahead of time. I do not want to impose. Marla looked at me, her eyes steady. Let me check with Lowell first, Mom, and we will call you right back. Of course, Beulah said. "Thank you, honey." Marla ended the call. We sat in silence. "She asked both of us?" I said quietly. "Yes, and she is booking her own hotel." "Yes." Marla reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were warm. Below us, the lights of Gatlinburg flickered on one by one. "What do you think?" Marla asked. I thought about my parents' warranty deed. I thought about 24 years of silent yes. And I thought about this moment, sitting on this balcony, being asked what I thought instead of being told what would happen. "Call her back," I said. "Tell her August works perfectly." The stars came out above the mountains, cold and bright. I listened to Marla confirm the dates, heard Beulah thank us, both heard genuine relief in her voice. When the call ended, we rocked slowly in our chairs, watching the night settle over Tennessee. "You did it," Marla said softly. I did not ask what she meant. I knew. I had reclaimed my house, my summer, my voice, my dignity. It took me 24 years to find my voice, but I found it. And to you listening to my story, remember this: silence is not the same as peace, and accommodation is not the same as love. For 24 years, I confused being a good husband with being a silent servant. I thought keeping the peace meant surrendering my voice. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until you're 71 to realize that your own home should feel like sanctuary. Not a hotel for people who never ask if you're tired. The cost of that silence nearly broke me. Family justice doesn't always look like dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it looks like a printed list of house rules. Sometimes it looks like finally saying no after decades of yes. I believe God gave me those extra years not to punish me, but to teach me that dignity reclaimed is never too late. You might think this is just another one of those dad's revenge stories, but the real lesson isn't about revenge. It's about boundaries and self-worth. True family justice means understanding that loving someone doesn't require sacrificing your own peace. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced something similar? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if Dad's revenge stories and lessons about family justice matter to you, please subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything to me. Thank you for staying until the very end. As a reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the core message about boundaries, dignity, and finding your voice is real. God bless you.